Yukari is a worthless and ugly normie who always dreamt of clapping the most beautiful girl in school. However, after he confesses and learns that she also wants to ride his meat saber, the government gives him a wife. Now he has to choose which kitty he wants to clap forever. It all started 40 years ago when the government approved a marriage law to stabilize the country's declining birth rate. According to this law, people are assigned their spouses by the government when they reach a certain age, and no one is allowed to have a romance with anyone other than their assigned partner. At present, Yukari is in class, staring at a 10/10 shawty named Misaki whom he has been in love with for years. Just then, his buddy Diki shows up and says he doesn't want to get married and wants the freedom to choose his wife. Yukari feels the same way since he only wants to marry Misaki, so when Diki promises to remain single, he joins the rest of the gang to seal the promise. Just then, they notice Misaki is joining in, which leaves them all stunned. After she leaves, the boys note that she hasn't been assigned a guy yet, even though she's of age, and Yukari gets sad again thinking about it. After school, he heads straight home and spends most of the evening considering the fact that he might not marry his dream girl. This prompts him to grab the eraser that started it all. 5 years ago, he saw Misaki for the first time in class and was too shy to say hi because he had never seen someone so beautiful. After noticing that she needed an eraser, he broke his into 2 pieces and mustered all the confidence he had just to give it to her. He was still too shy to even look her in the eye, but when she whispered a soft thank you into his ear, he realized that he was in love with her. At present, Yukari joins his family for dinner, and when they remind him that he will be of age in 2 days, he starts to panic. He immediately heads back to his room and realizes that the only way he will ever get to give Misaki backshots is if he confesses his feelings to her. The next day at school, he stops her in the hallway and asks if she recalls being in the same class to break the ice. When Misaki says she has no such memory, Yukari loses all his confidence and tells her not to worry. However, when Misaki turns to leave, Yukari puts on his big boy pants and asks her to meet up at a park after school, leaving her confused. Hours later, Yukari gets to the park and starts fantasizing about Misaki also being in love with him. But as the hours pass, he fears that she might have stood him up. He starts playing with sand to distract himself, but a cop mistakes him for a homeless crack addict and tells him to go home. Yukari finally accepts that Misaki is not coming and turns to leave, but just then Misaki comes running in and grabs his shirt from the back. After catching her breath, she apologizes for being late, but Yukari already has zero standards, so he quickly finds a bench to sit with her. After seconds of awkward silence, Misaki asks about the mounds he was making in the sand, and Yukari immediately starts yapping about his love for mounds. When he finally stops geeking off, she laughs and says he had the same energy years ago during a presentation he did about mounds. This surprises him since she claimed to have forgotten all about that, so he asks about it, and Misaki admits that it was a lie. But before he can ask her why she lied, he becomes spellbound by her beauty. Yukari then explains that he has spent every year since they met trying to become good enough for her, even studying relentlessly so he could attend the same university. Finally, Yukari gathers his courage and confesses his feelings, but Misaki suddenly starts crying, so Yukari stands up and apologizes for making her sad. While he's panicking, she pulls out the eraser from the first day they met and admits that she's also had feelings for him since that day. Hearing this makes Yukari emotional, so he hugs her and says he wants to be with her forever. The next moment, Misaki suggests that they kiss, and after getting on top, she admits that she has always wanted to do unholy stuff to him before locking lips. That first taste puts her in overdrive, and Yukari also gets lost in the sauce until he receives a text. One look at his screen leaves him frozen in shock because the clock just struck 12, and the government has already sent his marriage assignment. Anxious, he opens the text and gets excited to see that Misaki is his assigned wife. But when he tries to show her, his phone dies. He still remains excited since he gets to marry the love of his life. But then, 2 low-budget men in black show up and hand Yukari his assignment letter. Confused, he takes a look inside and gets shocked to find another girl's name as his assigned wife. He immediately tells the agents about the text, but they claim it must have been a mistake and offer to help him get in touch with the girl's family. After they leave, Yukari insists that the letter must be wrong, but Misaki holds his hands and says she is happy that they at least got to share these last few minutes experiencing true love. However, she cannot hold back her tears any longer and runs off, but Yukari immediately chases after her and manages to catch up before hugging her. By sunrise, Yukari's assigned wife, Ririna, gets the message on her phone and wonders what kind of guy he is. The next night, Yukari's parents tell him that they are going to see Ririna's folks and have already informed the school that he won't be showing up tomorrow. The following day, Yukari ignores his parents and sneaks into school with a mask, but Yusuke quickly spots him and asks why he is in school. They all already heard about his marriage assignment and thought he would be seeing the girl's parents by now. When Yukari reminds them of his promise to stay single forever, they fear that this idiot is actually being serious, so they report him. Minutes later, the teacher gives him a lecture about common sense and leaves him in the room to consider his next steps carefully. Just then, Misaki shows up at the door, so he tries to talk to her, but she stops him from opening the door and asks why he is not going to meet his assigned wife. Yukari explains that there is no way he is meeting some other favorite chick when he only loves her. And when Misaki tells him to forget about what happened between them, his heart shatters. After finally opening the door, she tells him to accept the marriage and runs off so he won't try to change her mind. Left with no choice, Yukari reluctantly decides to go see his wife's family, but when Ririna shows up looking like Rapunzel, he gets shocked. However, after they all get seated to talk, their parents do most of the chatting because Yukari quickly zones out and remains distracted until he realizes that Ririna has been calling his name. By the time he finally answers her, she throws the jacket at him and tells him to stop acting like he is the only one affected by the marriage assignment. After refusing to marry him, she storms out and Yukari's parents immediately tell him to go find her. While walking through the halls, Yukari prays that she will actually reject him so he can be with Misaki, but then he finds the room she is hiding in, and she quickly drags him inside. After staring at her kitty, Yukari gets up and apologizes, but Ririna believes that she is not a virgin anymore, so she tells him to take responsibility. He apologizes once again, and after forgiving him, Ririna asks why he seemed so lost minutes ago. Yukari then decides to come clean about Misaki, expecting that this will scare Ririna away for good, but she suddenly gets intrigued and asks for all the details. Minutes later, Yukari is finally done talking about his forbidden love story and expects his future wife to get upset about it, but Ririna gets excited again and says she's always wanted to hear about a real love story. However, since their parents are still waiting, she decides to continue later, so they head out and hold hands to act like they have accepted each other. In class the next day, everyone surrounds Yukari and gushes over how beautiful Ririna is until Misaki shows up. Yusuke spots her and immediately asks if she wants to see Ririna, but Misaki gets confused and asks why he is trying to create drama. Yusuke then decides to leave her alone, and a couple of hours after this, Yukari heads to Ririna's school because she called him over. While searching for her, he asks two students, who then recognize her by a weird nickname and explain that she was sent to the infirmary earlier. Minutes later, Yukari finds Ririna and tries to check on her, but she tells him not to worry, as she was just feeling a little overheated. When she asks how he found her, he tells her about the nickname everyone kept calling her, and this dingus immediately jumps out of the bed with her plot armor exposed to ask who the girls are. Yukari tries to tell her about it, but she ignores him to talk about how she was mostly homeschooled due to a serious disease she was born with. By the time she could finally go to school like everyone else, they had already mastered the art of socializing, while she barely knew how to communicate without making someone upset. This was why they gave her a nickname and started avoiding her. When Yukari says that she is the first girl that he can talk to with ease, Ririna gets a little flustered, but also feels weird since they are now betrothed to each other. As she gets up to leave, the wind on her cakes finally snaps her back to reality. And as she gets embarrassed, Yukari promises that he didn't see anything, while describing exactly what her cakes look like on the way out. He asks why she wanted to see him, and after Ririna says she wanted to talk about Misaki again, Yukari spots her walking past the gate and tells Ririna. Without giving it a second thought, Ririna stalks Misaki and introduces herself as Yukari's wife-to-be. Moments later, in a restaurant, Yukari hides and listens while Ririna explains that she is actually curious about their relationship and wants to know why Misaki loves Yukari. Misaki gets surprised by this, but then she starts yapping about all the things that made her fall in love with Yukari, like the Sasquatch hair on his back. After dark, they finally head out of the restaurant, and Misaki excitedly asks Ririna to hang out again because she has never been this free about her feelings before. As soon as she leaves, Yukari comes out of hiding and Ririna also becomes ecstatic, as she never expected to become friends with such a hottie so easily. She then confuses her emotions for a freaky attraction to Misaki, but Yukari tells her to relax and asks if she wants to kiss Misaki. After she says no, he describes what the kiss would feel like to make things a little clearer, but Ririna quickly realizes that he has kissed her already. She then tells Yukari to kiss Misaki again. The next day at school, Yusuke finds Yukari on a balcony lost in thought, so he asks if Ririna already dumped him. When Yukari explains that she suddenly invited him to hang out over the weekend, Yusuke tells him to watch Johnny Sins for inspiration because it's finally time to lose his V card. As Yukari gets embarrassed by this, Yusuke notes that he is actually a lot braver than he looks. Yukari is surprised to hear this, so Yusuke reminds him of the day a senior attacked him for charming his girl. While he was threatening to smash Yusuke's balls, Yukari was already pissing himself, but he still pulled out his phone to call for help. The senior noticed this and immediately tried to attack him as well, but Yukari had already called the cops. Back in the present, Yusuke starts laughing because of how scared Yukari looked that day and tells him to call the cops if something goes wrong in Ririna's room. However, Yukari barely reacts because he still can't figure out how to balance his marriage to Ririna with his love for Misaki. Several days later, he finally shows up at Ririna's place, and after she spends a couple of minutes verbally assaulting him for being late, her mom tells her to stop acting like she doesn't want him. She then wishes all three of them a fun time, but Yukari gets confused since it's only him and Ririna. The next moment, he enters her room and gets shocked to see Misaki waiting for them. Things quickly get awkward, so Misaki decides to leave, but Ririna tells her to stay and claims that having Yukari over is no big deal since she doesn't have feelings for him. Despite this, Yukari can tell that Misaki is uncomfortable, so he offers to leave instead, but Ririna also stops him and insists that it will be a fun experience for all of them. Yukari eventually caves and worries that Misaki will be left out, but just a few minutes later, he realizes that he was always the useless side character. When he finally reminds them that he still exists, Ririna suddenly asks Misaki to kiss him. While Yukari struggles to believe what he just heard, Misaki gets sick in her stomach and leaves to find the restroom. Yukari immediately asks Ririna if she has completely lost it, but she insists that it was the only way to spice things up since he is clearly too much of a wuss to make the move on his own. As he tries to explain how awkward the situation is, Misaki returns and agrees to the kiss, which surprises Yukari. Ririna, on the other hand, gets excited to see them make out and admits that she loves watching freaky stuff. Yukari immediately recalls how excited she was to hear about his relationship with Misaki and realizes that she has been a creepy weirdo this entire time. The next moment, Misaki gets tired of waiting, so she pulls Yukari close, but the inexperienced virgin flinches. Misaki finds this cute, but after noticing the weird look on Ririna's face, she stops and decides to go home. Before leaving, she asks Ririna if she enjoyed the show, and when Ririna acts as if nothing happened, Misaki asks if she is really okay with her future husband kissing his side piece in front of her. Ririna gets caught off guard by the question, so Misaki tells her to try to build a romantic relationship with Yukari before leaving. She insists that she doesn't mind if they kiss or do anything else, but Misaki can tell that it's a lie, and after saying that she might feel jealous soon enough, she leaves. Seconds later, Ririna runs back in and drops against the door while breathing like she just saw ghosts, so Yukari rushes over and asks if she is okay. After catching her breath, she tells him to kiss Misaki once every day. Naturally, he gets shocked by this and waits until they leave the house before asking if she really meant it. After Ririna says it's the best way to keep the flames of their romance burning, Yukari asks if something happened between her and Misaki, but she tells him to focus on making out with her every day. Just then, they run into Yusuke, and Ririna immediately hides behind Yukari for safety. Yusuke then asks if she has already agreed to become his freaky pet, so Yukari explains that she just has social anxiety. After saying that she's obviously still an inexperienced virgin like him, Yusuke leaves, and Ririna finally breaks out of her shell to cuss him out. Surprised, Yukari asks if she is not affected by his lethal face card, and Ririna claims she doesn't care. The next day, after gym class, Yukari and Diki notice that the girls have been gushing over Yusuke's beauty, so they try to get a reaction out of him, but he barely flinches and says it makes no difference to him. Just then, Yukari sees Misaki with her friends, but as he tries to drool over her as usual, he notices a weird tension between her and Yusuke. Minutes later, Yusuke leaves them in the changing room, but Yukari barely notices because he is starting to think that Yusuke and Misaki might have a secret relationship. Moments later, he is on his way to class when Misaki pulls him aside and asks what Ririna said after she left. After telling her about the daily kiss, Yukari spots a teacher and pulls Misaki aside before realizing that he is way too close to her robust assets. Just as he tries to back away, she kisses him, and they continue sucking faces while Yusuke spots them and decides to keep quiet about it. Hours later, Yukari asks Yusuke if they can talk after classes, but Yusuke has a club meeting to attend, so Yukari decides to wait for him. Over an hour later, Yusuke gets back and finds Yukari fast asleep. After laughing at his abnormal posture, he gets bewitched by Yukari's lips and commits a Diddy-level crime before moving to a random seat and calling Yukari's phone to wake him up. After getting up, Yukari asks if he has a special relationship with Misaki, and when Yusuke asks what he will do about it, Yukari's heart skips a beat. Yusuke notices this and changes the topic, so they both head out and talk about dinner plans. Much later, Ririna comes over to Yukari's place for dinner, but instead of letting her enjoy a wholesome dinner like any other in-laws, Yukari's parents start yapping about all the ways they smash after getting their marriage assignments. When Ririna asks why it was so easy for them, they explain that they really liked each other and couldn't wait to get in the sheets. They then try to ask why Yukari hasn't tried to make creamy pies with her yet, but lovebirds decide that they have had enough for dinner. Since the government agents will be coming soon, Ririna decides to wait in Yukari's room, but she starts going in the wrong direction. So Yukari grabs her arm to pull her back. This simple contact almost makes her floodgates erupt, but she manages to hide it before entering his room and thinking that a hurricane swept through it. Yukari notices how disappointed she is and tries to make up an excuse, but Ririna offers to clean up and spends a few minutes giving the room a makeover. Just as Yukari starts getting excited about having a girl in his room, Ririna finds an old photo album and decides to look through the pictures with him, when she finds one from a camping trip and starts mocking him. Yukari barely reacts because he actually loves that Misaki is also in the picture. Ririna notices this and asks when he first fell in love with Misaki, Misaki. So Yukari takes a moment to think before realizing that it was actually the day after the eraser incident because seeing her face made his world feel like a Disney movie. The next moment, Yukari asks Ririna if she has ever been in love, since she keeps yapping about it. So Ririna tells him about the time she spent as a hospital vegetable. Back then, a young doctor noticed that she was extremely lonely, so he took her on a walk one day and showed her a young human's anatomical model before claiming that it cried every night because it was separated from its mother. After this, she always felt her heart glitch anytime she passed by the model. When she tells Yukari that it could be her first love, he explains that she was terrified and didn't have enough brain cells left to tell the difference. All this love talk reminds Ririna of the kiss agreement, so she asks Yukari for all the juicy details. Seeing that she won't let up, Yukari tells her all about his expert-level tongue game with Misaki. Ririna then takes a moment to process how this makes her feel before claiming that she is perfectly okay with it. She also asks how Misaki felt in the moment, but Yukari barely paid any attention to that, as he was too busy kissing and praying that they don't get caught. All of a sudden, Ririna gets upset with him, so he tries to apologize, but she ends up right above her glizzy. Before the thing gets even steamier, Yukari's mom says the government agents have arrived, so they split up right before Ichihohu and Yahima walk in. However, Ichihohu can already tell that something sus was happening, but she says it's perfectly normal because the agency in charge of pairing people up has never made a wrong choice. After she explains how they monitor every citizen from an early age to give them the best partner, Yahima assures them that their matchmaking strategies have never failed. Ichihohu then asks how close they are as a couple, so Yukari claims he has already accepted his marriage, but he still struggles to develop feelings for Ririna. When Ririna tries to ask how they conduct their research on people, Ichihohu interrupts to ask if they have started soaking up the sheets with their special juices. After she suggests that they start fulfilling their fantasies with each other, they decide to leave. But when Ichihohu asks if they know where Misaki lives, Yukari feels a tightness in his chest because this can only mean one thing. Ririna asks if it's about her marriage assignment, but Ichihohu says it's classified before leaving. As expected, Yukari gets crushed because Misaki is likely about to be paired with some random dingus who will get to clap the kitty he's been dreaming of for years. Ririna tries to cheer him up, but he remains upset because Misaki's marriage assignment will end any chance he had at loving her. At this, Ririna expresses disappointment and asks if he's really going to give up on his relationship just because the government chose different partners for them. Yukari then says they should focus on their relationship, but Ririna tells him to forget all about that because she only wants to see Misaki happy. Just then, his mom shows up to tell Ririna about a camping trip their families are planning, and a couple of minutes later, Yukari walks Ririna out. Along the way, she tells him to ask Misaki about the marriage assignment and also kiss her, as if nothing happened, but Yukari decides to stop with the kisses and says it's weird that he does it because she says so. The next day at school, Yukari can't bring himself to talk to Misaki, but after classes, the teacher asks him to help her carry a bunch of pamphlets. Minutes later, he is carrying the pamphlets to class and hoping she is already there when he spots her having a conversation with Yusuke. His heart glitches again. When they finally meet each other in class, Yukari asks about Ichihohu. When Misaki says they did come to her place, Yukari congratulates her on getting her marriage assignment, but she explains that they just wanted to see her parents. This makes Yukari the happiest man on the planet, and he easily admits to feeling like his world was going to end when Ichihohu first mentioned it at his place. He then accepts that she will eventually get a husband and wishes her luck for when the time comes, but Misaki says she only wants him. After kissing him, she heads out to meet with a friend named Shu. Much later, Ririna calls Yukari to tell him that she has invited Misaki to their camping trip. The next day, Yukari follows Yusuke everywhere and begs him to come for the trip, but he keeps refusing until Yukari promises to buy his favorite cake. However, after Yukari notes that Misaki will be coming as well, Yusuke's insides twist as he regrets saying yes to Yukari. Days later, it's finally time for the trip, and after Yukari's parents leave with the car, he heads to the station to meet up with the others. Just then, Yusuke shows up and warns Yukari that he will regret asking him to join the trip. However, it's already too late to go back because the girls have just shown up as well, while Ririna pulls Yukari aside to ask why he brought his weird friend. Yusuke and Misaki continue giving each other the death stare. Yukari quickly notices this, but when he asks about it, Yusuke claims it was nothing like always. With that out of the way, they all take the train to the resort, and Ririna immediately runs off with Misaki while Yukari gets told to work on dinner. He decides to ask Yusuke for help, thinking the gorgeous femboy should be a decent chef, but he realizes his mistake when Yusuke slams some meat with a knife and asks why the meat won't cut. Yukari initially thinks this is just brain fog, but when Yusuke tries to wash veggies with dish soap, he accepts that a lethal face card is the only thing Yusuke has going for him. Despite this, when Yukari finally gets done with the food, the moms sideline him like a stagehand and glaze Yusuke like he did all the work. Yukari then decides to call the girls for food, but after minutes of searching, he finds them soaking up by a river and hides so they won't think he is stalking them. However, Ririna quickly notices and tells him to enter the water with them, but naturally his Excalibur awakens, so he declines the offer to hide his brick. Ririna still insists, but while trying to get close to him, she sprains her ankle, so Yukari decides to carry her back to camp. After telling Misaki to grab the rest of their stuff, he picks Ririna up and struggles to stop himself from eating up her cakes because she keeps rubbing up on him. Ririna also starts to feel warm and fuzzy inside because Yukari is a lot stronger than he looks, but just as she considers letting him hit, they get back to the resort, so she runs off to control her kitty. By the time Misaki returns as well, Yusuke asks if she thought things through before coming on this trip with her lover and his future wife. Once again, Yukari sees them talking, and this time Misaki actually laughs, which triggers his insecurities again. Minutes later, Ririna's dad treats her ankle with his knowledge as a seasoned vet before asking Yukari if he has any plans for the future. Yukari then talks about his love for burial mounds and says he wants to build a life around them. Later that night, Yukari stalks Yusuke from falling asleep so they can talk. Using this opportunity, he claims to know Yusuke's big secret and tells him to spill. So Yusuke accepts that he knows about the kiss and decides to come clean. However, before he can admit to being a zesty freak, Ririna shows up and asks them to join her on a hiking trail. Minutes later, she ends up alone with Yusuke, and after she tells him to keep some space between them, Yusuke warns that Yukari would be miserable in their relationship if she had such a grand reaction to simple words. Ririna then says that Yukari would never be as cold and inconsiderate as he was on the day they first met around the same time. Misaki decides to use this opportunity to get close to Yukari, but while trying to catch a firefly, she slips, so Yukari tries to save her, but they both go over the edge. He then tries to pull himself up, but after noticing that he's right in between her perfect drumsticks, Misaki pulls him closer for a steamy workout in the woods. Meanwhile, Yusuke tries to tell Ririna that playing matchmaker for Yukari and Misaki is not a good idea, but she refuses to listen. She insists that it's the best thing to do for the lovebirds, but then Yusuke explains that if she does succeed in making Yukari reject their marriage for Misaki, they will both face an extremely difficult life, as they will become known as the couple who defied a government order that literally the whole nation takes seriously. This means they would face rejection and isolation from basic amenities other law-abiding citizens have access to. Just as Ririna starts second-guessing her obsession with playing Cupid, they spot fireflies and follow them all the way to the lovebirds, who were just about to make creamy pies with each other's plots. Yukari immediately promises that they were just talking, and although the lie is obvious, Ririna and Yusuke stay silent so they can find their way back to camp. Along the way there, they decide to watch the fireflies, and when Yukari explains the risk they take on to find partners, Ririna once again wonders if her decision to support Yukari and Misaki was right. The next day, they all return to the station, and after Misaki leaves, Yukari asks Ririna to wait a couple of minutes so he can talk to Yusuke. After Yukari apologizes for making him come on the trip, Yusuke admits that he had a lot of fun and apologizes for being zesty before also leaving and failing to realize that he just made Yukari think he actually wants Misaki. He returns to Ririna with a sad look on his face, but when she asks about a historically significant burial mound, his face lights up. Days later, in a dream, Ririna takes a trip to Pound Town from Yukari's glizzy, and after waking up, she wonders why she suddenly craves his magnum when they haven't even kissed. The next day at school, she ends up at the library studying the science of smooching and completely detaches from reality until a girl named Ariza calls out to her. Ririna wonders what she wants, so Ariza introduces herself and tries to break the ice between them. But when he calls Ririna by the nickname she hates, Ririna takes off. Ariza then follows her around and continues apologizing until Ririna stops and asks what she wants. Ariza then says she just wants to be her friend, but this shocks Ririna since no one has ever wanted to be close to her. Ririna decides to hear her out, so Ariza reminds her of a certain doctor who looked after her while she was sick. Turns out that the doctor is Arisa's older brother, and since he always talked about Ririna at home, she got curious and decided to become her friend. The next moment, Ririna rejects the friendship and says she has nothing to talk about, so Ariza calmly accepts the rejection and commends her on being honest. This makes Ririna recall the day Yukari also commended her on being so open with her feelings, so she stops Arisa from leaving and admits that she has always wanted to know what a regular friendship feels like. While Arisa promises to teach her everything there is to know, Yukari gets done with this first class, so he decides to head out with Daiki and runs into Misaki. However, she makes up a story to avoid talking to him and leaves. Before he can react to this, the teacher tells him and Daiki to leave school because they have a lecture with the Marriage Assignment Ministry. They immediately head out and run into Yusuke, who just showed up at school. After telling him that not all dropouts make it big like Kani, they also tell him about the lecture before leaving. Hours later, Yukari arrives at the ministry building and spots Shu walking in before he meets up with Diki and his girl, Haruka. After she reveals how Diki keeps yapping about their friendship, Yukari notices that Haruka is way out of Diki's league, but as the lovebirds continue laughing together, he takes back his initial opinion. When Ririna finally shows up, Yukari's brain glitches because she has never looked this good before. He immediately compliments her new hairstyle, and after saying that it was a suggestion from Arisa, she pulls out a figurine she bought for him at the station. One look is all it takes for Yukari to revert to geek mode and yap about the cultural significance of the figurine. He also gets emotional to learn that she went out of her way to get him something, so he also pulls out a figure he bought for her as well. Diki and Haruka immediately get horrified because it's a stupid gift, but when Ririna also gets excited, they realize that the weirdos are a match made in heaven. After wishing them a happy ever after, they head inside, but Ririna gets embarrassed and says she will never think of Yukari romantically before running off. Around the same time, Shu, who just made it to the main control room, is joined by Ichihohu, who then starts a conversation about the ministry's efforts to ensure couples stay together. With the students all present, she leaves to give the lecture while Shu gets curious to see if Yukari will accept his marriage assignment or fight for Misaki. Moments later, Ichihoyu enters the lecture hall and starts explaining how the ministry's commitment has resulted in stable birth rates and a growth of the population. She further explains that this is because couples like them waste no time in getting freaky before sharing glizzy covers for all of them. When she asks if they have all gotten closer to their partners, Yukari asks Ririna if she enjoys his company, and she admits that he is actually fun to be around. He tries to say the same thing about her, but Ichihohu continues the lecture by teaching them how to make creamy pies in bed. After noticing that they all seem shy, she tells them to get over it because the fate of the country literally rests in their balls and kitties. To help them get in the mood, Ichihohu explains the amazing feeling you get after beating your pickle for 10 seconds, but Ririna acts like she has no interest in such nonsense. Like that isn't enough, Ichihohu decides to put on a movie to explain what she means, and Yukari gladly watches, expecting it to be a sweet romance movie. However, things quickly get spicy as the couple go from holding hands to busting nuts and making more cream than Yukari has ever seen in his life. He quickly glances over to see how Ririna is reacting, and as usual, she puts on an act while desperately wishing Yukari would take her to the back for a quick one. He then looks for Diki and finds the former woman hater about to kiss Haruka. The next moment, Yahima shows up and tells Yukari to make up his mind about who he wants because they are watching. Yukari tries to ask what he is talking about, but he leaves right before the movie ends. Ichihohu then tells everyone that they have prepared hotel rooms so they can practice what they just watched. Yukari and Ririna get scared by the thought of this and try to refuse, but then they hear someone talking about how a couple refused to smash last year and had to endure cruelty from literally everyone because of it. Minutes later, Yukari and Ririna enter their room, but while she starts joking to lighten the mood, he continues thinking about what Yahima said. After also realizing that his decision will affect Ririna, he decides to sacrifice his feelings and pushes Ririna down to take her V card. Being so close to her for the first time makes him extremely nervous, but the thought of getting her in trouble boosts his confidence, so he kisses her. After backing away and seeing that she hasn't tried to push him away, Yukari continues kissing Ririna until he backs away again and sees that she has been crying. He quickly moves away and apologizes, but Ririna loses it and asks why he would do something like this. He then explains what he heard from Yahima and the others before saying that the ministry is probably spying on them to make sure they actually clap. He says it was the only way to keep her out of trouble, but the fact that he almost took her V card over something so trivial breaks something in Ririna's heart. She then tells Yukari that the government would never be dumb enough to do something so vile since it would make the entire nation lose faith in the marriage system. Yukari quickly realizes his mistake and tries to check on her, but Ririna flinches because she is now scared of what he might do next. After he backs away, she suggests taking some time apart from each other so she can process everything, and he agrees. So they spend the rest of the night in awkward silence. The next day, she quickly leaves, so Yukari finds Yahima and blames him for putting those ideas into his head, but after asking if he would have responded the same way with Misaki, Yahima leaves him to think about everything. Eventually, Yukari heads home as well and continues trying to reach Ririna, but she ignores him. To make matters worse, his little sister starts asking dumb questions like when he plans to get married, but soon enough, he finally gets a text. Unfortunately, it's from the human-shaped whale Misaki likes to hang with. Days later, Yukari drags himself to school and remains upset because Ririna still won't talk to him. Moments later, he enters the classroom and sees Yusuke practicing lines for a play while the ladies act like his voice is enough to make their water fountains gush. While Misaki and Ayano work on perfecting his lines, Yukari asks the others what is going on. So they explain that the play is basically a woke version of Romeo and Juliet, where Yusuke will be playing Juliet. They try to tell him more, but Ayano flicks out on them for yapping about the play when there is still a lot of work to be done. After learning that Misaki will also be in the play, Yukari decides to tell Ririna since she would be excited for something like that, but he quickly remembers that she now hates his guts and decides to make himself useful. Minutes later, he starts helping with the props, but he zones out and continues thinking about Ririna until they mistake his hand for a nail. Much later, Misaki hears that he is in the infirmary, so she runs over and gets her breath under control before checking on him. When Yukari asks why she was so flustered, she admits that she was probably going to pounce on him out of concern. She then asks why he was distracted in the first place. So Yukari tells her that something happened with Ririna, but instead of explaining exactly what he did to her, he changes the topic to the fact that they haven't spoken since the camping trip. After telling him that their relationship would not be fair to Ririna, Misaki admits that life has been painful and meaningless without him. She still gets upset with him for hurting himself, but after noticing that something else is bothering him, Misaki gets closer and asks for the truth. Yukari then explains that he did something really bad to Ririna just because of a stupid rumor before telling Misaki not to worry about him. Afterwards, Misaki invites Ririna to a cafe for pancakes, and Ririna quickly falls in love with the amazing taste. Misaki then uses the opportunity to tell her about a cooking class from years ago where Yukari made amazing pancakes. Ririna barely reacts to it, so Misaki asks if she knows why Yukari seems a lot more upset than usual. Ririna claims she has no idea since they haven't spoken since, but Misaki can tell there is more to the story. However, she also admits that not seeing him has made her life a lot more boring than usual, but at least she now has Arisa to talk to. Days later, Yukari is still helping with the play when he hears a teacher talking to an alumnus who turns out to be Yahima. Before he can escape, Yukari grabs him to talk about his current situation with the girls. After noting that Yukari is even slower than he initially thought, Yahima tells him a story about a guy who fell in love with a girl before she got her marriage assignment. When it finally came, she suggested getting married so she could easily reject her assigned husband, but the guy was scared of making such a bold move. She ended up marrying her assigned husband and moved on, while the guy continued living miserably and hated himself for not doing what he really wanted, which was to be with the girl forever. After claiming that this is just a story, Yahima tells Yukari to follow his heart, so Yukari thanks him for the speech and heads out. Moments later, he sends Ririna a text checking on her and asks if they can go see a burial mound together. While he stares at his phone and prays for a response, Yahima meets up with Ichihohu, who then asks if the school is the same as they left it. After telling her how similar the school still is compared to when they were students, he looks away and wishes he could discard his feelings for her. Days later, Yukari wakes up and sees that Ririna is still ignoring him, so he gets ready for school, only to learn that she sent a letter to him. He quickly opens it and reads her words of encouragement for the upcoming festival. She also apologizes for the cold shoulder and says she needs time to get her emotions under control, but this is all he needed to see, so he excitedly runs out to give the play everything he has. Meanwhile, Misaki, who has been working on her lines, suddenly stops and recalls when Ririna admitted to being sad without Yukari. She realized back then that Ririna already loves him, and despite knowing that she can just let them love each other as they should, she decides to keep what happened to herself because she is not ready to give up her love for Yukari. Much later, Yukari gets all hyped to help everyone with the festival preparations. When Misaki eventually stops him and asks if he is okay, he assures her that his hand is all better and admits that he feels better because Ririna is finally talking to him again. He also says he still has to apologize, but Misaki tells him not to worry too much about it and leaves to hide how she really feels about him getting close to Ririna again. Several minutes later, Yukari makes it back in time to see Misaki practicing her lines. Seeing her sound so convincing puts him in a trance-like state until the others snap him back to reality, and as if he'd have seen Yusuke anywhere. Yukari then offers to help them look and quickly finds Yusuke reading by himself. Just then, Ayano says the costumes are finally ready, so they go to check them out, but while everyone else is excited about it, Yusuke takes one look at the ladyboy outfit and leaves. Yukari manages to stop him and asks why he is suddenly avoiding the play, so Yusuke asks if he was blind when they brought a dress for him to put on. Yusuke then says it's only a one-time thing and tells him to just put up with it for everyone, but Yusuke refuses and tells Yukari that he has no idea how humiliating it would feel. Yukari then calls him insensitive for trying to throw everyone's hard work out the window, but Yusuke insists on leaving. When Yukari tries to stop him again, Yusuke smacks his hand away right before an alternate version of Rick shows up. The next moment, Yusuke takes off to avoid him, but the psycho doctor catches up and turns out to be Yusuke's dad. After taking them both out to eat, Yusuke's dad tells him to never hit a friend like that again. In a bid to make things less awkward, Yukari claims it was all his fault, but Yusuke's dad laughs because he already knows the delinquent he brought into this world. After minutes of giving Yusuke a lecture on his behavior, he heads to the men's room. Moments later, he returns and tells Yukari to look out for Yusuke because he is the femboy's only true friend. After this, while walking home, Yukari asks Yusuke if he's really going to ditch the play, and after saying yes, Yusuke explains how all the stares he gets at school make him very uncomfortable. Yukari then tells him to just put up with the dress for the sake of their friendship, but Yusuke still refuses and says it's stupid that they are all obsessed obsessed with a story that ended in tragedy. Yukari immediately stops to think, and after recalling his conversation with Yahima, he tells Yusuke that Romeo and Juliet's story is a lot similar to what they have to deal with when the government assigns partners for them. He further explains that it is the true depiction of love, since they both fought against their families and society to stay together, even if it meant losing their lives. Thankfully, all this mushy talk starts getting to Yusuke, but he also gets captivated by Yukari's intensity. However, before he can make another creepy move, Yukari starts yapping about burial mounds again. Ultimately, Yusuke agrees to do the play, making Yukari excited. The next day, Yukari writes a letter to Ririna, inviting her to the play and checking on her as usual. He then heads to school where Ayano and a bunch of other girls are gushing over how good Misaki looks in her costume. Moments later, it's Yusuke's turn, but when they also try to take a look at his costume, Ayano tells everyone to stay back since it's a surprise. As they continue preparing for the festival, Yukari tries to rebuild his relationship with Ririna by writing more letters and praying that she will eventually trust him enough to hang out again. Luckily, she also responds, so he remains optimistic. One afternoon, he offers to help move flyers for the festival, but he accidentally drops them. So Misaki shows up and helps him take them to the committee room. As she then tells him about the festival preparations, he notes that she seems to be working a little too hard despite having the lead role in the play. Misaki gets surprised that he even noticed before admitting that she just wants to feel included in everything else, since being Romeo is not as exciting. On the way out, Misaki asks if Ririna will be coming for the play, so he tells her that he already sent her tickets and can only hope for the best. Misaki gets a little upset at the possibility of Ririna showing up, but she keeps it to herself before telling Yukari that Ayano initially wanted to add a kissing scene between her and Yusuke. Naturally, Yukari gets scared, but she tells him not to worry since they both refuse to do the part. However, Yukari takes the opportunity to finally ask what she thinks of Yusuke. Misaki then says she always thought he was a rude snub and was actually shocked when he took the play seriously. When they get to a bench, Misaki suddenly asks if he is in love with Ririna, and after saying that he only loves her, Yukari explains that he mostly feels concern for Ririna. He then asks Misaki what love means to her, and after taking a moment to think, she starts by explaining how she always looked forward to seeing him after the first day they met. Back then, she never imagined that they could actually have a relationship together, but that all changed when he confessed his feelings at the park. All of a sudden, Misaki starts bawling her eyes out and says she hates not being his assigned wife. She also tells him that Ririna might actually be perfect for him, which would explain why he has been so obsessed with fixing things with her. Misaki also admits to being scared that he will eventually dump her for Ririna, but Yukari hugs her and assures her that his feelings haven't changed. Several days later, it's finally time for the festival, so Yukari tries to make himself useful by handing out flyers, but people treat him like his existence is meaningless. The next moment, Ayano shows up with Misaki, and as expected, everyone flocks towards her because she looks like a literal angel. Yukari also joins them to drool over her, but while doing so, he recalls the conversation they had the other day. After she admitted her true feelings, she suddenly told him to forget about everything and claimed she just had a moment of weakness. When he asked why she wanted him to forget, she told him about the date she went on with Ririna and said it made her realize how much she cared about her. As a result, she just can't do anything to make Ririna feel bad. Back in the present, Yukari gets upset and wonders why she is so determined to hide her feelings, but then an old friend of Misaki named Mina shows up. Yukari immediately recognizes her because she hated his guts and always attacked him back when they were in the same class, because he always found a way to spoil everything when they worked together. To avoid a rather unpleasant reunion, he sneaks off right before Shu shows up with another friend named Ryoka. As he sneaks off, Shu notices and tells Mina, who then loses it because she never expected a dummy like him to get into the same school as Misaki. Moments later, Yukari runs into Yahima and gets worried since it's the second time he is showing up at school. He then asks Yahima if he is trying to take over from Diddy, but Yahima explains that he just came to help other students struggling with their marriage assignments. Yahima then recalls when Yukari mentioned receiving a marriage assignment with Misaki's name on it, so he decides to explain a couple of things. Firstly, the printed version of the marriage assignment is what comes first before they send the data to the cell phone network to deliver the text. There was also proof that someone hacked into the system around the time Yukari got that text, so Yahima concludes that it was definitely a mistake. He assures Yukari that Ririna is his assigned wife and apologizes for any confusion it might have caused him. However, Yukari remains hopeful that Misaki is the one for him, so Yahima asks if he has fixed things with Ririna since he just saw her outside. While he explains, Ririna shows up at the gate with Arisa, but then she starts second-guessing her decision to come see Yukari again. Arisa notices and tries to boost her confidence, but Ririna can't shake the feeling and asks Arisa if she is really okay with ditching her club meeting to come with her. After Arisa admits that she has always wanted to meet the hot alpha that stole her heart, Ririna tells her to tone it down a notch because Yukari is nothing of the sort. Several minutes after After this, Yukari realizes that he can't stop thinking about Misaki, so he decides to continue handing out flyers, hoping that will keep him distracted. To nobody's surprise, it fails until he sees Ririna and loses some brain cells to her beauty. They both stare at each other and forget how to use their mouths, so Ariza decides to break the ice, but Ririna still freaks out. So Yukari gives her a flyer and explains how she can find the theater for the play. After they leave, he continues handing out flyers before seeing Yusuke on his way to the changing room. Yukari immediately runs up to him and asks if he can come see what the outfit looks like, but Yusuke tells him to wait in the theater, like all the other background characters. When Yukari laughs at the blatant disrespect instead of reacting like he usually does, Yusuke gets worried and asks what's going on, so Yukari explains the situation with Ririna. Yusuke then says he has nothing to worry about because she definitely didn't come all this way just to keep fighting with him. After Yukari accepts that he might be right, Yusuke leaves to wear his costume, while Yukari decides to find some other way to be useful. Moments later, he returns to class and sees Seiki, the chick in charge of costumes, losing her senses over something trivial, so he decides to help with something else before she attacks him. However, this also ends badly for him, as a lot of equipment gets ruined, but in the heat of the moment, Yukari locks eyes with Misaki, who is currently on her way to the stage. While Ayano prepares everyone for the performance, Yukari spots Seiki hyping Yusuke up for his part, so he decides to talk with a nonchalant femboy as well. However, instead of hyping Yusuke up, he admits to feeling useless since he doesn't have an important role to play. Yusuke then reminds Yukari that the play would have been doomed if he hadn't convinced him to play Juliet. He also admits that he never expected to enjoy the process and thanks Yukari for breaking him out of his shell and helping him build real relationships with everyone in class. To further express his appreciation, Yusuke lets him see the costume, but after Yukari spots the fake milk jugs and cracks up, Yusuke regrets his decision and leaves in embarrassment. Yukari then finds his way into the theater and finds a spot beside Diki before locking eyes with Misaki again. After he wishes her luck, the play starts and everyone locks in as they become obsessed with the performance. Minutes later, Misaki and Yusuke deliver electrifying performances that leave everyone at a loss for words. They all applaud the performance, and after the team comes out to thank everyone, Yukari tries to congratulate Misaki personally, but Shu stops him to talk about the marriage assignment message he got with Misaki's name on it, while Yukari asks how she knows about it. Ririna spots them and decides to get closer, but she only hears Shu telling Yukari that Misaki is the one meant for him. Yukari tries to respond to this, but Ririna interrupts and asks if he actually got that message with Misaki's name on it. She also asks Shu for an explanation, so Shu simply says that Misaki has to stop running from her feelings and leaves. Right then, Yahima shows up and asks why she's here, but she ignores him and heads back inside. Ririna then asks Yukari how he knows her, and he explains that they were in the same school years ago. She then asks why he and Misaki never said anything about the first marriage assignment, so he explains that he wasn't sure if it was real. He then apologizes to Ririna for being so casual when she asked him for space, but then she tells him to forget about that for now so they can figure out what is going on. Just as they decide to find Shu with Misaki's help, Arisa shows up and asks Ririna where she has been all this time. She also asks who this weird-looking creep is, so Ririna introduces them to each other, and Arisa gets disappointed since she expected a shredded hunk to be Ririna's man. With that out of the way, they all head to the classroom, and while Misaki gets excited to finally see Ririna again, Yukari's brain cells deactivate as he struggles to find the right words to explain how her beauty made him feel during the play. They then remember the mission to find Shu and try to ask Misaki for help, but then Yusuke begs them to help him get away from his fangirls. Ririna also loses her senses to his beauty, but after they explain that it's actually Yusuke, her hatred returns. Eventually, though, she helps Misaki stop the girls from grabbing Yusuke's glizzy, but then the creepy fanboy hears a familiar voice laughing and spots his brother Yuichi watching with their dad. After Yuichi says he enjoyed the show, Yusuke loses it and tries to attack him, but his dad stops him. The next moment, Yusuke's dad thanks Yukari for inviting him on the camping trip and also invites him to a wedding. Yukari gets confused, since Yusuke obviously hasn't been paired up, so his dad explains that Yuichi is actually the one getting married. After Yukari accepts it, Yusuke's dad invites the girls as well and tells Yusuke to hold on to the costume just in case they can't find a clown to entertain everyone. Later that night, Yukari calls Ririna and apologizes for being incompetent because he couldn't get Shu's number from Misaki. Thankfully, Ririna also failed just like him because she was too busy admiring the costumes. Yukari then promises to get the number tomorrow, and he actually manages to pull this off without stress. However, after realizing that he has to send Shu the first text, he panics since this is also something he has never done before. Eventually, he manages to curate his very first text and hopes that Shu won't flame him with her response, but after he sends it, Shu blocks it to avoid more low-intelligence messages. Meanwhile, a bunch of girls in Ririna's class suddenly ask for help with a math problem, and after helping them, she asks Arisa what is happening because no one has ever just wanted to be her friend. Arisa then explains that she changed a lot recently, and since she no longer responds to people with a death stare, they obviously feel comfortable enough to say hi or ask for help. After Arisa explains just how bad her previous attitude was, Ririna gets a text from Yukari asking to meet up at the park. Minutes later, she gets there and sees that he has been drowning himself in tears while making burial mounds. When she asks about it, he gets confused and starts yapping about burial mounds. Ririna then tells him that no one cares about them and asks why Shu's decision to reject him is such a big deal. When she decides to text Shu as well, Yukari gets worried and warns her of the danger of doing this, but Ririna refuses to be spineless like him and gets a text back from Shu, who then offers to meet up when she has time to spare. Naturally, Yukari wonders why she would easily respond to Ririna and ignore him, but Ririna tells him to forget about all that because they have something way more important to deal with. They both agree to start by visiting Shu's school, so the very next day they head there. And Ririna shows Yukari an article that names one of Shu's family members as the person responsible for the messages sent out to newly assigned couples. Moments later, Shu shows up, so they demand answers, but she only agrees to talk at a cat cafe nearby. Once they get there, Yukari gets the bright idea to ask why she blocked his number, and Shu easily says it's because she doesn't have time to text with pumpkin-faced dummies like him. When Ririna asks if Yukari was actually meant to marry Misaki, Shu refuses to answer and only tells them that she was just helping Misaki. She then asks Ririna why she cares so much about their relationship instead of building a new one with Yukari. After Ririna admits that she has been obsessed with setting them up with each other since the first day, Shu explains how much the situation is affecting Misaki, which is why she thought to get involved. Yukari then asks why she said they are soulmates. So Shu explains that in the past, she always hated Misaki because she seemed way too fake. However, when she saw her staring at Yusuke's picture one day, she realized that this seemingly perfect girl had the hots for an average Joe who barely even knew her. As the days went on, Shu paid more attention to her and realized that she was completely wrong about Misaki. She eventually decided to ask Misaki why she was so obsessed with the seemingly worthless loser, and Misaki explained that she actually didn't care what anyone else thought because he was all she wanted. Shu then asked how she would feel if they got assigned to each other, and Misaki got emotional, as she had not even thought that far ahead before. Shu says she still can't believe that Misaki loves him, but Ririna skips all the mushy talk and asks about the person behind the marriage assignment messages. Shu then says the name they saw belongs to her grandmother, who always claimed that assigned couples would quickly forget about their past relationships after meeting their selected partners. This makes Yukari curious, so he asks if this is what will happen with Ririna. After Ririna says she just wants to protect Misaki from the pain of a heartbreak, Yahima shows up and tells Shu to stop interrupting. Shu tries to defend herself, but he insists that it's wrong and suggests leaving Yukari to forge his own path. Shu then agrees that he is right, but tells him to pay for what they took or Shu will report him for stalking. On the way out, Yukari asks Yahima if Shu had anything to do with that message, and he says it makes no sense for Shu to hack into the system just for that. After he leaves with Ikihohu, Ririna asks Yukari if she is dumb for trying to set him up with Misaki, instead of telling her the truth. Yukari takes her hand and commends her on always trying to make everyone happy. Days later, it's finally time for Yoichi's wedding, and while the girls meet up and decide to walk together, Yukari finds Yusuke and asks why he is still outside like everyone else. Yusuke then gives him a history lesson that started years ago when his parents would always obsess over seeing them marry their government-approved wife. This made Yusuke hate the whole marriage assignment thing, and with Yuichi now getting married, he hopes it will be enough to stop their parents from always yapping about marriage, while they all slowly walk towards the wedding venue. Yukari wonders if he can actually love two people at once. What Shu said the other day also starts plaguing his heart, but then a lady stops them and asks if they are all assigned couples. Yusuke immediately explains that only Yukari and Ririna are in that horrible situation, so the lady introduces herself as a publicist. After she shows them samples of her work, they get excited to work with her. When Ririna reminds the lady that they have a very busy schedule as students, she claims this is exactly why they are perfect, because she is trying to promote how good young love looks. After she says they would both look amazing in wedding dresses, the girls get flustered but do a good job of hiding it, while Yukari also gets embarrassed. Ririna starts having second thoughts and asks Misaki if this is really okay. After Misaki tells her to treat the shoot like a trial run for her real marriage with Yukari, this immediately fixes Ririna's mood. After taking Ririna's details, the lady also invites Yukari for the shoots, and his reaction makes Ririna flustered. A couple of minutes later, they all watch as Yuichi finally shows up with his bride. As soon as they get to their seats. An agent from the ministry named Itohu shows up and plays a video to show everyone how their love story began. It all started 4 years ago when Yuichi was still in college. While the video plays, Yukari considers having something similar to Misaki, but he recalls that that dream already went out the window since he is marrying Ririna. While he continues thinking, Misaki notices that Ririna has been enjoying the video, so she compliments her smile. Ririna then takes the opportunity to thank Misaki as well as Yukari for coming into her life because she would have never experienced these emotions without them. She also tells Misaki all about her new friends at school and admits that she would have never experienced this if not for her and Yukari's help. The next moment, Misaki asks Ririna to invite her to the marriage with Yukari regardless of what might happen between them. Much later, they get done with the wedding ceremony and prepare for the flower toss, but then Yukari realizes that he left his phone inside, so he heads back in and finds Misaki on the floor. Concerned, he rushes over and asks if she's okay, but she tells him not to worry as she just feels a little emotional about everything. Despite this, Yukari can tell that there is something else going on with her, so he asks for the truth while Ririna starts to wonder why he is not back yet. When he continues demanding to know why she's upset, Misaki asks him to confess his love again. He easily agrees to this, but just as he confesses to still loving her, Ririna shows up at the door and watches as he kisses Misaki. Without saying another word, she runs back to the crowd, and later that night, Yukari struggles to fall asleep as he wonders why Misaki pushed him away when it was obvious that she also wanted the kiss. After also recalling that he felt bad looking at Ririna on the way home, he realizes that this is why Shu has been fighting to protect Misaki. The next day, Yukari's mom tells him about a plan to visit the hot springs with Ririna's family. Before he can respond, they have already concluded the plans, so he decides to ask Ririna if she knew anything about it, but she is way too obsessed with the kiss she saw between him and Misaki. After Yukari's dad takes his stuff and tells him to spend some time with Ririna, they both head out to take a tour of the town. While doing so, Ririna accidentally trips on a stone, but Yukari is right there to catch her. However, she immediately recalls how close he was to Misaki and decides to ignore all that so they can actually have a good time together. Several minutes later, Yukari almost burns his hands off at one of the shops, so Ririna gets him some screens before making fun of him for being so fragile. He then notes that she's been laughing a lot more than when they first met, and Ririna agrees that it's all because she's been learning how to express herself more often. Eventually, they both get back, but then Yukari's mom hands over the key to their room, which surprises them as they never expected to get the same room again. He immediately promises Ririna that he wouldn't try to clap her like last time, but she claims to be over it and tells him not to worry. Much later, they join everyone else for dinner, and Ririna's mom takes this opportunity to explain how cool the baths are before thanking Yukari for showing up. She's especially grateful because she barely ever got time to spend with Ririna until he entered her life. After dinner, Yukari decides to try out the bath, but on his way there, he hears Ririna also heading towards the ladies' bath, so he calls out to her. They then spend a couple of minutes talking about the bath before Ririna reminds him of what she told him the other day. When she asks if he believes in fate, Yukari takes a moment to think before reminding her that everything he has done till now has been for a chance at dating Misaki. Naturally, Ririna feels some type of way about this, but right then her dad shows up, so she decides to talk about this later. After they both get to the room, Ririna struggles to fall asleep, and so does Yukari, so she gets up and asks if they can have a conversation. Yukari agrees and immediately tries to turn the lights on, but she stops him and says that it will just make the whole thing uncomfortable. This makes him worried about her, so he tries to make her feel better by talking about random stuff, but then she suddenly tells him to choose Misaki over her. After taking a moment to make sure this is not a dream, Yukari asks why. Ririna then explains that her life was incredibly painful and lonely when she had not met them. After meeting him and becoming friends with Misaki, everything suddenly felt better, and she always looked forward to seeing them again because she loved their experiences together. She further explains that meeting them is the only reason she now has friends at school. This made her realize that Yukari would be sacrificing the love of his life just to make her happy, and she doesn't want that. However, since there is still the risk of getting into trouble, she explains that there is actually a better way of dealing with their marriage so he can be with Misaki. For this to work, they both have to act like they don't get along in any way until the ministry finally dissolves their marriage and accepts that their pairing was wrong. Doing this will save them from getting into trouble since it will be the ministry's decision to break up their marriage. However, Yukari starts crying and says that he doesn't want to act as he hates her. Ririna also acknowledges that it will be difficult, but she says it is the only way to help him be with Misaki. Since Misaki can also do the exact same thing if she gets assigned to some random guy as a husband, it's guaranteed to work. But Yukari remains upset that he now has to pretend like they hate each other's guts. To make him feel better about everything, Ririna tells him to think about Misaki's smile and consider the fact that he no longer has to hide his feelings or his love for her. This means they won't have to hide in corners to kiss or wait until there's no one around just to spend some time together. This finally makes Yukari accept the plan, so he thanks Ririna for being so supportive of his love before also apologizing for keeping a secret from her. When he finally tells her about the kiss, Ririna says it's nothing to worry about since they are already the dream couple. However, Yukari insists that it was wrong of him to keep it hidden. So Ririna recalls the first time they kissed and considers telling him something about it as well. One good look at his face makes her change her mind, so she decides to keep it to herself again. All of a sudden, she decides to stop holding back and says that she needs good experience with a guy so she can be a good wife for the next person she gets assigned. 2. Yukari gets a little confused by this, but when she asks him to basically be her practice dummy, he easily accepts and kisses her. For the first time, Ririna realizes that she wants more, so she tells him to sit back so she can make the move this time. However, Yukari quickly notices that she is still holding back, so he decides to support her and ends up kissing her intensely for a couple of minutes until she gets soaked in the nether regions. She becomes desperate for his meat saver, but Yukari stops her from making a horrible mistake by hugging her until she relaxes. As soon as she feels a little better, they decide to hold hands and gaze at the night sky while talking about random things to ease the mood. Several days later, the girls meet up for the photo shoots, but Ririna stops Misaki from going inside so they can have a conversation first. Around the same time, Yukari refuses to leave his bed despite all of his mom's efforts, until Yusuke shows up with a couple of gifts that his dad sent as a thank you for showing up at the wedding. When Yusuke asks why he's not at the photo shoot, Yukari says that he feels he betrayed Misaki by granting Ririna's wish. Yusuke gets confused by this since he doesn't even know what Ririna wished for, but he then asks Yukari if he regrets doing whatever he did with her. The next moment, Yukari realizes that he actually wanted to do it, which means that he now has feelings for Ririna as well. He realizes that he actually loves them both, but still feels bad because it feels like a betrayal of their trust in him. However, Yusuke tells him to stop acting like he's supposed to get everything right the first time. He explains that the girls also know what they're getting themselves into, so Yukari should just follow his heart. Despite this, Yukari insists that he did something wrong, so Yusuke tells him to stop trying to make everyone else happy and do what he wants for a change. He admits that it might be a little painful for everyone, but it's the right thing to do, and after a couple of minutes of thinking, Yukari agrees with him and runs out the door. While he runs towards the venue for the shoot, the girls get ready, and while doing so, Ririna decides to ask Misaki why she rejected the plan to set her up with Yukari. Misaki refuses to give her the real answer and simply says that she will be the best wife for Yukari, but Ririna refuses to accept this because her love for him is not nearly as strong as what Misaki feels. Misaki then accepts that she really loves him, but she still insists on sacrificing that love to make sure that they are both happy. Ririna then tries to ask a couple more questions, but Misaki gets taken away to start the photo shoot, so she decides to save it for later. Several minutes later, they are just about to take the last photo, but then the cameraman tells them to imagine being with their future husbands to see how good their smiles look. However, they both get upset because of the situation with Yukari, but then he shows up and takes a moment to catch his breath before complimenting them both. Misaki immediately starts fighting the urge to bawl her eyes out, and after noticing this, Ririna asks if she's really okay with giving up on her love for him. When the photo shoot lady asks Ririna if she wants a separate picture with her man, she grabs Misaki and says she wants the picture of the three of them together. Will Yukari end up having both of them as his wives, or will the government lock him up for trying to breed two baddies? Comment part 2 to find out. And don't forget to leave a like and turn on post notifications to make sure you never miss any of our videos.